Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to have a look at alternatives to if in conditional sentences. So the typical conditional sentence would be something like, if you have any doubts, raise your hand. In this case we've used zero conditional, where it's a fact, it's always true. This is something always available for you to do. If you have any doubts, you can raise your hand. Now we've got a series of alternatives to if. We've got I wish and if only. So if only I wish. We've got I'd rather. We've got vocabulary to suppose and imagine. Hope and the difference between, well, hope, let's say hope, which will differentiate from wish. Okay, so if we look at the sentence, if you have any doubts, raise your hand, we could also say it in a few different ways. For example, suppose you had a doubt, you would raise your hand. This suppose and imagine are synonyms in this case. What we mean is, imagine this hypothetical situation. If this happened, then you would or you could raise your hand as well. It's a possibility, but also it's something you would do. And because it's a hypothetical present or future, we use the second conditional structure. So we use second conditional instead of if, we use suppose. We can also use imagine. Let's look at some others. If only and I wish. So the typical way we use if only and I wish is that we cut the conditional phrase into the cause and the consequence. This is the cause, this is the problem that would occur, and this is the solution to the problem. Except with if only and I wish, it can only work in second and third conditional. This is a second conditional, but it needs to be something logically that you would wish. And in this sentence, we don't have that situation, so we need to change it. If I won the lottery, I would buy a new skin in my favorite game. Alright, so we've got a wish, a logical wish. So what we would do is cut this in two, and the typical way to do this then is to change the first clause of cause into if only. This means if only I won the lottery. You don't need the other sentence. It means everybody knows what would happen if you won the lottery. You would buy the things that you want. So you would say, if only I won the lottery, if only this cause, and the consequence is obvious. But if you want to emphasize the consequence, then you take the second clause, and then you say, I wish, plus clause. So we've got, I wish I would buy a new skin in my favorite game. But instead of would, we change it to could, so it's the possibility which is enabled by winning the lottery. So in this case, we take the cause, winning the lottery, to be obvious, and we just talk about the result. So in this case, we emphasize the cause, if only I won the lottery. And in this case, we emphasize the result, I wish I could buy a new skin in my favorite game. Hope. Now there's a difference between hope and wish, which is hope is something you expect to happen. A wish is imaginary only. So we could say, if we started with the phrase, if you aren't ill, I will see you next week, which is in first conditional and it's a prediction, which corresponds to the meaning of hope, which is a real, which is something real, as opposed to wish, which is something imaginary. So if you aren't ill, I will see you next week. So we eliminate the first clause, and then we insert I hope. And we've got, I hope I will see you next week. Let's look at another example. If you perform well in the interview, you will start the job next week. So we could take this potentially two ways. We could say, I hope you perform well in the interview. Or we could say, I hope you will start the job next week, taking the cause to be obvious. In any case, when we use hope, it's typically from the first conditional, and when we use wish, it's typically from the second conditional. We've looked at if only I wish, we've looked at suppose and imagine, we've looked at hope, now we need to look at I'd rather. The structure in I'd rather is I'd rather the person, so the plus subject plus past tense. I put a sentence here, an example sentence. If you didn't tell Mom about the vase, I wouldn't be in trouble. If you didn't tell Mom about the vase, I wouldn't be in trouble. So we've got it in second conditional form. And what we would do here is take the clause of cause, take that out, and replace it with I'd rather. I'd rather you didn't tell Mom about the broken vase. So that's the answer there. And it means my preference is that you don't tell Mom about the broken vase. Therefore, I will not get in trouble, which is the consequence. Let's look at another example with I'd rather. If you make a lot of noise, if you made a lot of noise, because it's hypothetical, if you made a lot of noise, you would distract me. So again, we take the clause of cause and we substitute I'd rather, and then we've got I'd rather you... No. That doesn't work. We need to make it if you didn't make a lot of noise, you wouldn't distract me. That's what I want to happen. If you made a lot of noise, you would distract me, which is what I don't want to happen. So I would rather you didn't make a lot of noise. Let's do another example. If you reserved a table at the restaurant, we would have a better table. So again, we take the first clause and we substitute I'd rather. So we've got I'd rather you reserved a table at the restaurant. And this expresses my preference. And the result is obvious. We suppose that we would get a better table. Therefore, I would like you to reserve a table. Or I would rather that you reserved a table. Okay guys, that's it. That's the four structures I wanted to present. That's if only and I wish, I'd rather, suppose and imagine, and hope.